Lightning overwhelmed by a 5-goal third period from the Ottawa Senators, and we have to ask, are all these injuries starting to become too much for the Lightning to handle?
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Lightning. I am your host, Nick Morgan. Normally have a partner in crime, Greg Stephen, but he is on vacation this week. Not good vibes for the Tampa Bay Lightning right now. Another 6-2 loss last night to the Ottawa Senators. We'll break it all down. And we have to ask the question, are the injuries becoming too much for the Tampa Bay Lightning to be able to handle ahead of the playoffs? That plus 2 straight division losses, we'll see where that leaves the Lightning in the playoff race right now. A lot to get to on today's show, but let's begin with that big loss to the Ottawa Senators, 6-2, including a 5-goal third period for the Ottawa Senators. And let's begin with our one word to describe this game, because I think it tells the story of the game: jalopy. Do you guys know what a jalopy is? Some of you older people might. Jalopy is an old beater car. You know, it's one of those rickety things that are held together with duct tape. You know, you always see somebody driving in it, like the down on his luck guy at the beginning of a movie. He's in the old car that won't start, and he just says, "Come on, girl. Not today, not today," and then like does a celebration when it like starts. That's a jalopy. And it just kind of feels like the Tampa Bay Lightning are the old jalopy that you're just trying to get back to the driveway before it completely falls apart on the road. The bolts just look like they're wobbling to the finish line at this point right now. They look tired. They look a little bit out of sorts. And they just don't have the intensity that you need in games like this. And that couldn't have been more evident than the third period of this game. Remember, the score was 1-1 headed into the third period. 5 times the Ottawa Senators scored in that final period. And it did feel like every time the Ottawa Senators scored, the Senators got a little bit better. The Senators scored a goal and let that be the momentum to build them up in that third period. 25 shots on goal for the Ottawa Senators in the second and third period. They got better as the game went on. They didn't sit back. They turned the juice up. And on the other side, it just felt like everything started to fall apart for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And once that happened, they couldn't get that jalopy started after each goal. And it's a mix of different things for the Lightning. We saw some like complete positioning breakdowns. We saw some sleepy plays, or quite frankly, we just saw a little bit of bad luck. You know, let's walk through that third period and you'll see what I'm talking about here. That second Senators goal, it starts with Brayden Point, who had a great game, by the way, going in 1v4. 1v4. Misses a shot, there's a rebound. Somehow, none of the 4 Tampa Bay Lightning players in that area got the puck. Part of that's luck. Part of that's also that I felt like the 4 were boxed in way too tight around one guy. Nobody was kind of, up positioning, getting ready for the line change. But anyway, Fabian Zetterlund gets the rebound, scores to make it 2-1. It was a shot that bounced off of Erik Cernak's hand, so a little bit of bad luck there. But again, it starts with a little bit of unawareness on the ice to know where people are. And 2 minutes later, Jake Sanderson, I almost called him Connor McDavid because that's what he looked like on that play, just completely embarrasses the Lightning defense, gets in the neutral zone, skates completely just around JJ Moser, like not even through or past JJ Moser, like just takes the long way around towards the boards. Moser never picks him up, and then Sanderson comes in alone, skates towards the net, and then the puck, not really sure if it was from a rebound or if it was just kind of, some sort of weird dragging it in as he skated across the crease. But for whatever reason, Sanderson got the puck past Jonas Johansson. That's a play where the Lightning D has to be better there. Somebody has to get Sanderson and make it hard for him to get on net. Also, quite frankly, Jonas Johansson, you have to be quite better there also, my friend. Look, Lightning made it, battle back to make it 3-2 thanks to a Corey Perry goal. And then comes a sequence that I feel like sort of highlights the theme of the Lightning's night. So this is when Yanni Gourde gets called for a holding the stick penalty. Quite frankly, not a good call. It was a dumb call. And I would say that too if the Ottawa Senators got called for it. Lightning are pissed about it. Yanni Gourde looks like he is being told to, calm down. You're about 2 seconds away from getting an unsportsmanlike conduct call. John Cooper is furious about it on the bench. The emotions are still raw. And then 20 seconds into the power play, I don't know what happened here. The Senators have a chance. It looks like Jonas Johansson has the puck covered, but then a Senators player gets pushed into Johansson. His skate hits the glove. The puck comes squirting out somewhere. I don't know. It kind of went into a mess of bodies. In comes Erik Cernak, who's like diving towards the crease or falling down towards the crease. He goes into Johansson while the puck goes like past him, like bounces back out into the slot. And then at that point, you have Tim Stützle, who's just has this puck on his stick with everybody else just dogpiled to the right of the goal. And he's just got an easy way to put it top shelf. And then that's your 3-1. You could definitely see there was something awry. There's definitely some miscommunication because if you watch the play, you can kind of see Jonas Johansson and Erik Cernak getting into it a little bit after the goal, like both kind of like pointing at spots on the ice, very animated. So not a good play, but hang on because it gets much worse for the Lightning in this particular sequence. John Cooper challenges for goaltender interference, doesn't get it. I tend to agree with that call because I think it was Nick Cousins was pushed into the net. So it's one of those plays where it's like, what do you want him to do? He's getting forced in by the defender. 10 seconds into that power play, this to me is the play that is inexcusable. The one play of the night that's inexcusable. It's a power play. It's a 5-on-4. There's no line change. It's Senators win the faceoff, get the puck, back to their blue line to set up. There's no, turnover, no, play going the other way. It's just a normal play. And somehow the Senators get a 2-on-0 out of it. Like on a nothing setup, they win the faceoff. They're back in they're kind of back in their zone waiting to set up. Outlet pass to Brayden Point, who's behind the defense at the blue line. And then he gets it to Jake Sanderson, who's also behind the defense. It's a breakaway. So you have two players behind the defense. It's a breakaway. Jake Sanderson scores. How does that happen? Like, I know you're shorthanded, but there's nothing. There is nothing there that should have let that play happen. That was just horrid. Absolutely horrid defense by the Tampa Bay Lightning, by a crew that you expect more from. That cannot happen in games like this. And that particular is the play that makes me think the Bolts are just not all there right now. They're making a lot of plays that just admit sleepiness. Like, I saw like some comments last night and it's like, oh, this happens every year. The Bolts clinch and then they kind of coast towards the postseason. My question is, why are you coasting at all right now? This was a game, like we've been saying all week, this was going to have big implications for one team or another. Both teams had something meaningful to be for. It was going to be a playoff-like atmosphere. The Ottawa Senators are still fighting for their spot in this Eastern Conference playoffs. They showed up to play this game. The Ottawa Senators came into this game with all of the intensity in the world. They got better as the game went on. They wanted to leave it all out there. The Bolts did not. And I've seen some comments that were kind of like, oh, calm down. This happens every year. Like kind of like the rolling the eyes at the people getting mad at games like this. They're saying, oh, not anything to play for. Look at how cold the Panthers were, blah, blah, blah. To me, that's a poor take this year. I mean, look, the Lightning coasted the last 3 years, and look what happened in the first round. I would say they were pretty outplayed in all 3 of their last first round playoff series. I mean, they lost it, but it was also they just got worked, I think, by the other team. The East is too good this year. And there's quite frankly some teams that I think have proven over the past month or so that they're better built than the Tampa Bay Lightning, or at least better right now. Home ice advantage in round 1 could absolutely make the difference of that first round playoff series. So yeah, from the Bolts perspective, I look at these last 2 games and yeah, I'm disappointed. If this is a sense that they're coasting, why? Maybe part of that is the injuries that have happened. And that's something that we'll talk about coming up here in a little bit. Are these injuries becoming too much for the Tampa Bay Lightning to handle down the stretch? We'll dive in when we come back on Locked on Lightning. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Whether you're a hockey fan, basketball fan, baseball fan, there's nothing like being in the crowd for a big game. The energy, the excitement, it just has something that watching a game on the couch can't touch. But getting tickets, that part has always been a little bit tricky. Well, that's why Game Time has become my go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. Game Time puts the advantage back where it belongs, with me, with you, the fans. Anytime there's an event coming to my area, it could be a sporting event, it could be a concert, it could be a comedy show. The first thing I always do is open the Game Time app because I know I can get tickets locked in with minutes. One of the best things about Game Time is they show you the all-in price up front. The price I see when I'm scrolling is the price at pay at checkout, so I'm not floored by any surprise fees. I also love being able to see the view from my seat before I'm buying. Game Time shows you the exact view of the venue from the seat you want to buy, so you know you're not getting stuck behind any weird sight lines or anything like that. There's plenty of great last-minute options. In fact, right now, NBA tickets are showing up at solid prices. If you use Game Time, everything feels quick, intuitive, and stress-free from start to finish. And the less stress you have buying tickets, the more you're able to enjoy your game. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that is code LOCKEDON for $20 off. You can also get started online at gametime.co, not .com, to redeem your prize there. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets at low prices guaranteed. We're back here on Locked on Lightning. Nick Morgan here. Greg Stephen is on vacation this week. Hey, I want to remind you guys to check out our Everydayer Club. You get ad-free episodes of Locked on Lightning and access to the group chat on Discord with all the other listeners of the show and hockey fans from across the NHL. Tap the link below in our show notes to get started, or go to lockedonpodcast.com to get started as well. All right. Big story for the Lightning this season has been the injuries. It's been the theme all season long. The theme, though, has always been that the Bolts have found a way to overcome it and get things done on the ice. And you've got to give the Bolts credit, because it just, every time that it feels like there's a major injury and you think, oh, this may be too much for the Lightning, they find a way to make things happen. I mean, you think about all the great success stories that have come from guys filling in from injuries this year. We've talked about Darren Radish a bunch, how he's elevated his game, going from a guy that was, just kind of a depth guy, healthy scratch at times, into a guy that you kind of look at and say he's going to be a cornerstone of the defense for the next couple of years. Charles-Edouard Destou. This was a guy that was playing in Europe last year. Not many people, other than maybe guys who like deep dive into scouting, knew much about him before this season. comes in and he's become an everyday impact player on that Lightning blue line. Even somebody like Dominic James, comes in, was in college last year, probably goes to the NHL maybe a little bit sooner than his development path would have, expected him to. He comes in and before he gets hurt was making a big impact in the Bolts bottom six. There's all these success stories. And in fact, this was a comment on our YouTube page the other day. It really is amazing that you see the Lightning, on top of the standings and then go back and check all of their injuries that they've had this year and all the roster turmoil. And you start to think, wow, like this really is a coaching job that John Cooper should have credit for. This really says a lot about the quality of the team this year, that they're able to overcome all these and still be in first place in a tight division. But I just wonder if we're starting to see signs of the Lightning starting to get stretched a little too thin, too late into the season. Third period was kind of the headline yesterday, but you kind of saw it a lot through these first two games. A lot of confusion, a lot of miscommunication, a lot of players not necessarily being where, their teammate with the puck thinks they're going to be. That to me is a sign of the chemistry being out of whack a little bit and guys maybe being stuck on autopilot when they need to maybe go back to basics a little bit. Obviously Lightning had to adjust yesterday. You still don't have Brandon Hagel. You still don't have Anthony Cirelli. You still don't have Pontus Holmberg, who seems like he could be out for a long time. So the Lightning had to adjust their roster a bit. Mitchell Chaffee, who played the past couple of games, he gets sent down to Syracuse. The Lightning bring up the Syracuse Crunch's three leading scorers: Conor Geekie, Dylan Duke, Jakob Pelletier. I like this. I like bringing them all up at once. The Lightning need some scoring depth right now with both Hagel and Cirelli out of the lineup for who knows how long. And I also thought it was interesting how John Cooper put all three of them on a line together. I will say mixed performance from those three. Remember the second Senators goal, the 1-on-4 where, people were kind of maybe not positioned exactly the right way. Those were the guys that were out there in the ice from that. But at the same time, even though they've only played like 10 minutes or fewer, I did think they brought a little bit of an energy into the lineup. Obviously those guys even though it's in the AHL, they can score. We saw, Conor Geekie last year in the NHL, threaten, make a little bit of an impact. Look, all three of these guys can threaten offensively. And I do think if they can get some scoring together, that's an interesting dimension for the Bolts to have in their bottom six. So I'm interested to see, nobody really knows what the injury situation is going to be, but I'm interested to see if they keep those guys together and maybe have them carry some chemistry, because they've been playing together all season long, albeit maybe on, a couple of different line combinations and stuff like that in Syracuse. But for the most part, those have been like your three main scorers in Syracuse. And maybe those guys are the ones that help get some chemistry going. The other big question going into this game in terms of injuries was how the Bolts were going to replace Pontus Holmberg. It winds up, interesting enough, being something we've talked a lot about in a couple of shows these past couple of weeks. Oliver Bjorkstrand is on that line. And that's interesting because Oliver Bjorkstrand has played every role imaginable for the Tampa Bay Lightning this season. They've elevated him to the first line at times. He's been on the fourth line at times. He's played, 16, 17 minutes a game. He's played like 8 minutes a game. He's been a healthy scratch. He's been on power play 1. And to me, this is going to be a big pressure situation for Bjorkstrand because Pontus Holmberg was part of the Lightning line that not only had some of the most impact, but the one Lightning line that have really been together consistently game in and game out since, I would say early November at least. And look, Bjorkstrand, it makes sense that he's there because he is known historically for his two-way game. That was sort of the big thing that we heard about Bjorkstrand when he got traded to the Lightning last year. I think a little bit of a different player than Holmberg. There's some similarities and there's some differences. Both unafraid in puck battles, both willing to get up there on the boards and try to win the puck. Holmberg may be a guy who's a little bit more physical, maybe a little bit more active stick. Bjorkstrand is somebody who maybe relies a little bit more on positioning and, taking away space and stuff like that. But either way, you hope Bjorkstrand can kind of become the Oliver Bjorkstrand that he was a few years ago, a guy kind of known for being in the middle six and being able to make plays on both ends of the ice. Maybe a play in the defensive zone leads to some momentum the other way. And maybe some consistency with those two line mates is what gets Bjorkstrand back to finding his groove a bit, as the season goes on. And that's kind of a theme, too. When it comes down to it, if the Lightning want to finish the season strong down the stretch, it's going to come down to the stars. Nikita Kucherov, he's going to have to carry this team right now. And they're going to need him to be, a major player in the postseason too. And I know that's kind of been the bugaboo, but this is the time where Kucherov really needs to step up here. Other plays on the ice, Andrei Vasilevskiy obviously didn't play last night, but they need him to be that Vezina goaltender that he's been all season long. And they're going to need to continue to get good depth support from guys like Jake Guentzel and Brayden Point. You're going to need these players despite all these injuries. The ones that are there, you're going to need them to keep doing what they've been doing all season long. You're going to need Nikita Kucherov to be that 3-4 point per game guy again. Andrei Vasilevskiy is going to have to stand on his head. You're going to need Jake Guentzel and Brayden Point to get a little bit closer to having at least a point per game and be a point per game player. That's just what it's going to take right now to survive these injuries these past couple of weeks, or in the coming weeks and in the first round of the playoffs. It's a tall task, but they are built for it. And I think that's been the secret weapon for the Lightning this year when there have been injuries, is when there are injuries, it's the A players that are still on the team that wind up elevating their game and carrying this team. We haven't seen much of it these past couple of games, but down the stretch, those guys get going, and then maybe we're talking about the Lightning being able to survive their current injury situation. Speaking of the playoffs, obviously another loss for the Lightning, a win by the Canadiens puts the entire Eastern Conference picture in flux again. We'll dive into the Lightning's current playoff picture when we come back on Locked on Lightning. Back here on Locked on Lightning, Nick Morgan here. Greg Stephen has the week off. And a big game last night for playoff implications because Lightning lose again. The Habs won in overtime last night, which means we got a three-way standoff in the top of the Atlantic Division. Tampa Bay Lightning, Buffalo Sabres, Montreal Canadiens, all with 102 points, all with 78 games played, so all with 4 games left. It's going to come down to the wire, folks. Lightning, as it stands right now, does have more regulation overtime wins than the other two, so by default, they still have that first place spot. But this is going to be tight, and again, this is going to be no room from error for the Lightning or for any of these teams, really, from here on out. And, of course, what's the Lightning's next game tomorrow? The Montreal Canadiens. I do think in this situation, and I said it a little bit at the first block, I said it on yesterday's show, I do think that home ice advantage is going to be a big factor here. Because if you're the Tampa Bay Lightning, let's look at your two options if you wind up finishing third. And that's the other thing is they can finish no lower than third, thanks to Boston losing yesterday. But like Tampa Bay Lightning, they start round one, let's just say in Montreal. Have you ever been to a hockey game in Montreal? It's an awesome atmosphere. I mean, it's like European soccer. It really is. Like the crowd is into it all game. It's a loud building to play in. The fans get into everything, get into any little thing, like Nikita Kucherov so diligently pointed out 5 years ago. You're really trying to win a 7-game series in that environment. And the other thing is the Buffalo Sabres, who haven't been to the playoffs in a decade and a half. Are you really wanting to test a game 7 in that environment? And look, I think there's a weird thing up out there about home ice advantage being overrated. Like, whatever, if you're a good team, you should be able to take the crowd out of it right away. Sure, but that doesn't mean that's an easy task for any team. And there's also other things at play there. The last change, how crucial having the last change is. In fact, we talked about that earlier this year. Having the last change is what helped get that Yanni Gord, Zemgus Girgensons, and Pontus Holmberg line out there against some of the other teams, their opponents, big stars. When it's the other way around, you see coaches actively trying to get their stars away from that line. And so that little things like that, I think, are also going to be important. So yeah, I would like to see the Lightning treat these last couple of games, maybe with more intensity that they've treated these first two, because I do think home ice advantage is going to be a big factor. Anyway, that's the brouhaha at the top of the standings. We also have to talk about the insanity that is the wild card race. There are 6 teams still in contention for 2 wild card spots. It's starting to become a little bit more of a pull away for the Boston Bruins. They have 96 points. They're 6 points clear of that cutoff line. So I would say at this point, you kind of safely assume the Bruins are in it. And then Ottawa Senators, by virtue of their win last night, they now have the last wild card spot. They're 2 points ahead of the next team behind them, which is the Columbus Blue Jackets. And if you look at the standings, maybe if you're a Bruins fan or Senators fan, you're still wanting to finish the season strong. You still have to win every game from here on out. But you look behind you, and maybe there's some signs of, I don't want to say signs of light, signs of, okay, maybe we feel better, because the next 3 teams in the wild card race are all slumping big time. The Columbus Blue Jackets beat the Red Wings in overtime last night. Poor Red Wings, but they're still 3-6-1 in their last 10. The Red Wings have completely melted down this season, 3-6-1 in their last 10, and just dropping some must-win games that are handed to them on a platter. And then the New York Islanders, who just fired Patrick Waugh, they're 3-7 in their last 10. So the Senators, I think, have taken advantage of that. And maybe the Sens are looking behind them a little bit and saying, like, okay, we're hot right now. The teams behind us are slumping a little bit. We've got the momentum. And of course, the Senators are now in a position where they control their own destiny as well. So if they just keep doing their thing, it does look like we might wind up with 5 Atlantic Division teams in the playoffs. The only, I would say, wild card in the mix right now, the last team still in contention, it's the Washington Capitals with 87 points. And they have been on fire lately as well. Other than a pretty ugly loss in there against a not very good team. But the Capitals are still in it. That math may be a little bit too big for them, 5 points out with 4 games to play, but they've also been hot. So I would say if the Senators slip a little bit, that's where you maybe see the Capitals, if they can win out, sneak into that last spot. But I don't know. To me, it seems like halfway through this week that decided everything, we're getting closer to kind of seeing which teams are going to be in the mix. And if the playoffs ended today, it would be Lightning Bruins round 1. And look, the Bruins are a tough team, but somehow out of all possible options, that's the one I would kind of prefer. You would have the Senators taking on the Carolina Hurricanes, who are right now running away in the Metropolitan race. And they look like they have a pretty firm spot of being the number 1 seed in the East overall. And then you have Sabres Canadiens. But of course, everything can change in a couple of days. Obviously, tomorrow's Lightning Montreal game is going to be huge in determining playoff seeding in that Atlantic division. Which team is going to be the one? Who are the 2 and 3s that are going to be going at it? A lot of this can flip on a dime, folks. So stay there. We will break it down for you as it goes on. Make sure you guys are following us on social media. Locked on Lightning pretty much wherever you scroll. You can also join our Everydayer Club to chat with hockey fans across the NHL and get ad-free episodes of Locked on Lightning. And however you're listening, make sure you subscribe. Whether you're tuning on your favorite podcasting platform, whether you're watching on YouTube, subscribing always lets you guys know when we have fresh content available for you. That's going to do it for us on today's Locked on Lightning. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. New episode coming at you tomorrow. We'll see you then.